Brethren, in 2005 we were in Portugal where we spent 15 days ministering there in some festivities precisely at the end of September, and when it was our return scheduled for October 5th, I was praying in the dawn on the 3rd. As always, we were looking for the presence of the Lord, and on that occasion the Lord appeared to me in a vision at that dawn and spoke to me a few words saying, "My servant, when you return to your nation, I will pass you through a very deep experience. I will make a great revolution in your nation." I didn't understand that vision. I only saw the Lord from the waist up low, and when he finished expressing himself, and the Lord said, "Remember Martin Luther," I said, "I remember." I saw the Lord turn and leave and I continued praying until dawn. I was worried about that vision and returned to Brazil arriving on the 7th. I arrived home and since that vision and my arrival I began to encounter difficulties, some barriers. Starting from these days we have entered into struggle. We went through many difficulties throughout the year. We faced many barriers. Then the church suffered a theft and we felt that blow. At that moment the fight was getting harder. That morning when I was informed that the church had been broken into and that they had taken everything, I left the house and when I entered the church the police were already there and the experts had already arrived to inspect the site, and I asked permission to enter the church. I heard a voice that said, "Now what will you do?" At that moment I saw a devilish figure, a satanic character who was smiling with a laugh of mockery in his face. I lowered my head like someone who was disappointed, but I still believe in what the Bible says. He would send another comforter to be with us, and on that occasion while the adversary mocked me, the Spirit of the Lord came to me and said, "Tell him he took your rings but he didn't take your hands. Tell him I'll give you back everything he took." So I raised my head and addressed the enemy telling him, "The Lord, I will restore to me the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm, and the caterpillar, and the palmer worm." Someone heard me and said, "Pastor, you are talking to yourself." I said to him, "It seems I am alone," but I was talking to someone. Despite the theft we continued the work. God opened the doors through many difficulties, and I want to say something to the workers tonight. The life of a pastor is a desert. During the day, the sun is hot, and the nights are cold and dark, and I discovered something. You will understand pastor only by being pastor, otherwise you don't understand. Sometimes we're at home but we're alone. Sometimes we are here in church surrounded by a crowd like this one but we are alone. It is a desert, but it was in the desert that God fed Elijah, gave him bread and water. He said, "Get up man, walk, because the journey is long." May the church understand that our life is a desert. In the month of January, we have launched this year prayer campaign at 7 a.m. and it has lasted for 4 years. I was in prayer one morning like that and the Lord said, "From today you will not sleep in the night. Forget about the sleep in the night. I need you to do constant prayer every night." I said, "Lord, this is too difficult." He said, "I'm still ordering you to do it." So I started a long series of night prayer. It was a great battle. My wife was worried. When I spent the month of January praying in the night, not sleeping meant I was in so much affliction. I continued in prayer as we crossed the month of February, month of March, and I started to feel weak and a lot of pain in my body. Often church workers asked me, "Pastor, what's happening to you? We are very worried about you." I told them I am all right with God. He knows what is best for me. On the 8th of April I went to do a wedding of a very simple young woman and young man. The ceremony began and the invitation was made to the church to stand to welcome the bride, and the brother who led the ceremony said, "Now we will receive the most awaited by everyone," and I watched as the lady began to enter accompanied with her father, and suddenly a spiritual vision opened to me, and I saw when a hand entered the temple and pulled up a screen before my eyes, and I saw the bride that started to transfigure and became glorified. I looked at her and I thought, I'm going crazy, it's not possible. Her father also transfigured himself and they both looked like crystal. I said, "Lord, what is the meaning of this?" The bridegroom left the altar and went to meet that bride that became like crystal, and when they untied that bond of her father that gave her to the bridegroom, the vision of the glorified bride ended, and the Lord said, "What you have seen is because I wanted to show you that this is how my encounter with my church will be on the rapture and the wedding and banquet of the Lamb." When the ceremony ended, the vice president of the camp called me and said, "Pastor, what is happening to you, sir?" I said, "Nothing." "No, brother," he said, "you are very strange." I came home after the wedding at almost 2 a.m. tired. I said, Lord, let me sleep tonight. I'm tired, Lord. My wife was tired. She went to bed then fell asleep. I went to the living room and went to pray, and that night was a cold night, and I went out to the backyard of the house. I looked at the sky and said, Lord, in your presence I have been praying for more than 100 nights. Tonight I am here contemplating the sky, the work of your hands. In the last 3 months I put my face on the floor of the house, but tonight I want to put my face on the dust of the earth where I was taken. But I want to ask you something. Put my heart in its place and in order. Make me a true shepherd who love his church. I spent that night in prayer until 5 o'clock in the morning with my face on the sand. I said, Lord, I want to be different. I don't want to continue being this pastor that I have been so far. Give me more courage, more desire to do your work. At 5 o'clock in the morning I came back wet from the serene of the night. I didn't make it to Sunday school in the morning. I stayed at home for I was very tired. It was Sunday Holy Supper that day. I told Pastor Fagundes, I want you to minister to the brothers tonight. I'm feeling very weak, but at that time the Lord spoke to me and said, you will go to church and administer supper to my children tonight. Exhort them to purity and holiness. We managed to celebrate the supper. It was 11:30 when we were taken over by the glorious presence of God, and by the grace of God was poured out upon us. We went home after midnight. I asked the Lord to give me sleep that night when I was tired. Still I spent the night praying. In the Monday morning, my wife looked at me and said, I'm going to send the elder brother Jade and the elder brother Buan to take you to the doctor, for you are not well. They took me to the doctor. He did a heart electrode and did several exams. When the doctor came back he said, look, Pastor is well, there's no problem. His health is good, his heart is fine, you can take him home, there's nothing. I returned home. I spent Monday at home with my family in the evening, but when it was 11:30 I went to the bedroom. I lay down. When my wife fell asleep I said, Lord, the doctor said I have nothing, but you know I'm weak. The Lord said, but it's from weakness that I draw my strength. When you think that you are weak, and that's when you are strong. The next day I went back to the doctor again and he asked me a question. He said, Pastor, I want to ask you a question. Do you sleep well at night? I told him it's been 120 days I have not sleep in the nights. He told me, so you are going to die. You have to understand that you are a pastor, but even Jesus couldn't save the whole world. I said, you don't understand what is happening to me and you don't know anything. It seems crazy, but for me it is the moment of the greatest achievement of my life. He sent me home and said, I'm going to give you some medicine to take to sleep. I asked someone else to minister to the church and asked for prayer on my behalf, but at that time the Lord spoke and said, you are going to my house, you cannot stop going, you will exhort my children on the purity of the body and the sanctity of the soul and spirit. I said, Lord, but I can't even stand. He said, my grace to you is enough, and I went to worship that night, my beloved ones. I ministered the word, and when the service ended, the brothers and children hugged me, said, Pastor, it seems like we are already leaving for heaven. We are feeling so much the presence of God that seems like we are already in heaven. Even though I was weak, I felt like a victorious pastor to hear the brothers speaking about God's presence when I stand at the pulpit. I spent Tuesday to Wednesday praying, and I went to the night meeting with the workers, for every Wednesday we have the prayer circle with the workers at night. I exhorted them that night, asking to preserve the doctrine of holiness and purity, which is something that we cannot lose. It is our identity. And there was a priest named Brother Antonio Mora. When the meeting ended, he came and put his hand on my head like that and started to cry and said, Pastor, tell us what is happening to you. I said, later you will know, but I can't tell you anything now. I went home after my wife fell asleep. I said, Lord, let me sleep, I can't take it anymore. The Lord said, tonight is the last night of sleeping abstinence, and I went to pray. When it was 4 o'clock in the morning, I said, Lord, I can't take it anymore, let me lie down and rest. At 6:30 my wife looked and said, wake up, you are not used to sleeping late, you are always in prayer, get up. I'm going to school to take Evelyn in a little while, I'll be back. And she went to school. I lay there in the room, started to feel a very strong pain in my head. She came back from school and looked at me. He said, look at you, remember when we got married you said that at 35 years old you were going to die. She said yeah, you're already 35 and going to be 36. I told her but I'm not going to die, don't worry. But I want to make a request to you, get out of this room. I want to ask you, lock this door from the outside, let me be alone. I don't want to see you, I don't want to see our children today, let me be alone here. She looked at me at the bedroom crying and said, I'm going to wash our clothes at the laundry, if you need me you shout to me. I said everything is well. I lay there in that room, my loved ones, suddenly thinking about that headache that was getting worse. All of a sudden, my wife started singing a hymn that I really like. I began to hear my wife's voice was disappearing. At that moment the roof of the house and the walls disappeared, and I saw the sky open. When the sky opened, my beloved, I saw 5 celestial beings coming down. I said I must have died. The angels are already coming to take me, and I was looking at these beings arrived in the room, and 2 of them positioned themselves at the side foot of the bed and 2 at the head, and the 5th said come with me now. I said to where? And he said remember the promise I made to you there in Portugal. I said I remember Lord. He said the time have arrived, now is the appropriate time, come up with me, and we started to go up. I looked and saw my body on the bed. I saw angels there surrounding that bed where my body was. We went up slowly. A sister arrived and said I need to talk to Pastor HELDA. My wife said the pastor doesn't want to talk to anyone, the pastor is not well. She said I need to talk to him. My wife said no, I won't let you talk to him. Then arrived Deacon Jose and Brother Vidal with a pickup truck. They said we need to talk to the pastor. I listened to their conversation and I saw my body on the bed, and my wife looked at them and said look, the pastor is locked in the room and he told me that he doesn't want to see anyone, but they said to her there is a problem there at the church and only he can solve it, and we need to talk to him. She said look, I'll go there if he finds it urgent. He opened the bedroom door. She turned on the light. I saw when she jumped on the bed and shouted and ran saying the pastor is dying, and she jumped and hit me with her hands on the chest and said God give our pastor life back, he can't die. No sooner the brothers entered and began to call, they called the hospital. There was no ambulance. They called the police headquarters. I saw when the police car arrived. My wife was in agony. Suddenly she started to sing, for she said the Lord told me to sing, and while she was in that agony some brothers arrived. The police took my body out of the room and placed it in that truck. They rushed and entered the emergency room of the hospital. The doctor looked at my wife and said, look, unfortunately we can't do nothing to help. The brothers fought and said doctor sends him to Porto Velho, do whatever it takes, put him in the oxygen balloon. They put me in a serum and they started to apply some medicine, and I saw everything, that affliction and that agony. Glory God. I saw when he asked them to take my body to a ward, and I heard when a nurse said doctor, there is a lot people out there, these people keep arriving, there are all believers in that church, they are workers there, they are pastors. I'm not a believer, but the secretary say, let them come in so they can at least say goodbye. Afterward the man said from now on you don't need to see any more.